The first episode of Season 2 of Peacemaker sees Peacemaker going to apply to become a member of the Justice Gang. From the Superman movie, the Justice Gang consists of Green Lantern Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl, who are both present conducting these interviews, as well as Mr. Terrific and Metamorpho, and is owned and operated by billionaire Maxwell Lord. Now, before Peacemaker's actual interview, the interviewer who was in before him comes out, and she is in a rabbit costume, and she is crying, and we later learn why she's crying, because of some not-so-pleasant comments that Maxwell Lord was making that she could hear because of a microphone mishap. But who is that character? Well, she's actually a pretty obscure, lesser-known, more modern Batman villain from the comics. The fact that she's in live action before villains like Killer Croc or Mad Hatter is kind of funny, but also she's a character that I find interesting, so I wanted to go through her entire comic history, which is not too extensive. She was a character created in 2011 for the Batman The Dark Knight New 52 comic book series, specifically the first story arc, Night Terrors, in which she was a new villain that Batman was encountering for the first time. Specifically, he was encountering her at scenes where some of Batman's old villains were going a little crazy, that they were no longer afraid of anything. They wanted to prove how great and awesome they were, and she was just always there and kind of fleeing the scene while Batman then had to deal with the juiced up villain that he was fighting. Batman discovers that they are juiced up on a hybrid combination of Scarecrow's fear toxin, but instead this was making them get rid of fear, Bane's venom, and some rare flowers stolen from Poison Ivy. Meanwhile, Bruce Wayne is dating someone new that he recently met, a philanthropist named Jaina Hudson. And now, listen, it's comic books. Batman's been living this life for a while. There's a new female villain. Bruce Wayne's dating somebody. He's not stupid. He's starting to suspect, okay, maybe this Jaina person is the White Rabbit, but while he's on a date with her, he gets confirmation that White Rabbit has just been spotted. So he goes, oh great, not the same person. Fantastic. Well, we'll get there in a second. Batman discovers that this whole plot was put together by Bane to get all of these villains juiced up to fight Batman so that way Bane can come and break Batman again. Honestly, not the greatest plot, but ultimately, White Rabbit was hired by Bane to be the person to go in and, stick the villains with this substance. When Batman rescues Poison Ivy from custody, again, because part of the chemical composition was stolen from her, Poison Ivy confirms that, she's just hired help. She's only so loyal to Bane as she gets paid for it. Batman takes down Bane. White Rabbit is just kind of continues to be on the loose, but at the end of the comic run, we see White Rabbit go into Jaina Hudson's apartment, and the two of them touch hands and combine back into one person. Jaina Hudson is a metahuman with the power to split herself into her regular self and the White Rabbit. And specifically, this is somewhere between half confirmed and half just speculated at. Jaina Hudson is half Indian. Her father was an American diplomat to India. While there, he got a woman pregnant, had Jaina. When she was 9, he brought Jaina with him back to America, and I'm assuming that in the higher-up philanthropal, rich, white-centered society that she was brought into, she probably didn't have the greatest time as a child dealing with racism in America. And so this power to split herself, the version that she splits into, is a white woman, while she is not. She is Indian, brown. So this could be some kind of repressed racial tension that she's feeling with herself because of the bullying that was done to her. And there's a little bit of support later on in the comics that she can be split in a way that she needs to fit the situation, but we'll get there in a little bit. But this Batman The Dark Knight comic arc wasn't very popular, so White Rabbit wasn't really touched again in a major way for a hot second. She does appear in the background of the Forever Evil Arkham War plot, in which Bane comes back to Gotham. He causes a prison riot at Blackgate, which is where White Rabbit is being held at the time. I guess she got caught at some point. And she works with Bane's crew to take down the guards, and then also to fight off a bunch of Arkham inmates, because at the time, going on like in the DC comics at the time, the Justice League has vanished. Villains are like taking over the world. The Arkham inmates have decided to split up Gotham. Bane comes in and is like, actually, I'm going to take all of Gotham for myself. So it's the Blackgate goons versus the Arkham inmates. While in Blackgate, White Rabbit fights on the side of Bane's goons. But then once she's out, as we see in a Clayface comic taking place at the same time, once she's out, she's like, all right, I'm not really in the fight, just hang out at a bar. Talks to Clayface a little bit about what's going on, and then later on in the run is seen in the background fighting alongside the Arkham goons. So again, what Poison Ivy said before, no real loyalty to Bane in particular, just kind of doing whatever benefits her the most. At first, it was fighting on behalf of Bane, who was breaking her out of Blackgate, and then when she was out and about, obviously, she, for some reason, decided to fight on behalf of, it seems, maybe particularly Mad Hatter, because it's stated that the area that she's fighting in is the section of Gotham that Mad Hatter, claimed for himself, which does make sense. They're all Alice in Wonderland-themed villains. Notably, Tweedledee and Tweedledum are still fighting on behalf of Blackgate, though, so maybe while some of Mad Hatter's usual collaborators are fighting against him, he's like, oh, you know what? Other Alice in Wonderland person, White Rabbit, you want to work together? And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever. That is the last we see of her in this run. The next time that we see her is, again, briefly in the background during a Batgirl comic run, where she is working for Knightfall, a villain of Batgirl who wants to clean up crime in a wealthy area of Gotham, and she does this by hiring a bunch of supervillains and assassins to come in and kill every petty criminal and minor, weed and drug dealer in the section of the city, and then for all those supervillains to leave, and yay! All the villains kill criminals! Crazy plan. I don't think White Rabbit has any particular stake in that game. In fact, why should she? Other than, you guessed it, getting paid. But to combat this plan, Batgirl contacts a lot of superheroes to help her out. And here we see Batwoman taking down White Rabbit. There's then another time that stuff goes crazy in Gotham. What? And a jungle spreads throughout Gotham. Honestly, the backstory of this, I don't even fully know. I haven't read everything that's going on, but the only White Rabbit involvement here is that she is having tea with Mad Hatter, continuing to show that there is some kind of friendship or connection between the Alice in Wonderland themed villains, but the heroes of the story decide we're not getting involved with that, let them have their tea, and they continue on. White Rabbit is then seen again, one panel cameo in the background, working for Bane during the Year of the Villain storyline. So it can be kind of assumed then that when he takes over Gotham yet again, these are things that just happen roughly yearly in Gotham, a villain takes over the whole city, that she's part of that whole plot where Bane uses some mind control to make all of the criminals of Gotham become the police force of Gotham. While she's not directly shown there, because she's shown in this Forever Evil background arc, it can be assumed that that's what happens to her. And then when Batman foils that plan, that she continues on with her life. Maybe this last time being actually mind-controlled by Bane is why she decides not really to work with him again, because that's the last time we see the two of them intersect. We then see that she has gotten to know some of the larger criminal network of the DC Universe, as she's present at some of Harley Quinn's hosted Villain of the Year awards at the Legion of Doom headquarters, which is just fun that she's there. Her relationship with Harley Quinn also seems to continue when Harley Quinn moves in with Poison Ivy and Catwoman, and they decide to host a housewarming party, and we see that White Rabbit is there in the background, and in fact she is hanging out with a very similar Batman, Batgirl villain, March Harriet, who is also based on a Alice in Wonderland character, also has a rabbit-like theme going on, but she's specifically based off of the March Hare, who has tea with the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland, which is different than the White Rabbit, who says that they're running late as they lead Alice down the rabbit hole in the actual story. But the two of them are hanging out at the housewarming party. Now, the housewarming party itself kind of escalates after Wonder Woman and Batgirl are also invited by Harley Quinn to the party and end up getting into a brawl with the supervillains there. We don't know if White Rabbit joined in on the brawl, but we do see that March Harriet does. Maybe White Rabbit left, maybe she joined in on the fight, who knows, but that is the last we see of her there. The next time we see White Rabbit in the comics is a bit more prominently in a role when she is working for new supervillain Shush. Specifically, White Rabbit hijacks a blimp to try to kidnap a specific scientist that Shush wants for her plans. Foiled by Batman and Robin, arrested, brought to Blackgate. In Blackgate, she is almost killed by Shush, so that way she can't reveal any of Shush's plans to Batman and Robin. Batman and Robin come, save her, fight off the terrible trio who come to kill her as well. She very briefly fights alongside Batman and Robin, mostly to save her own skin. But then when Batman's like, great, you're safe, we're going to arrest you again, she runs off. Then in Gotham City Sirens, we once again see someone trying to kidnap the White Rabbit, specifically because she is hot. And these villains are putting together a real-life video game where the avatars of the people who played are actual people who are kidnapped and mind-controlled to be characters of the game, controlled by the video game players. And they're like, White Rabbit's hot, we kidnap her, we get some investors as an exclusive character that they could play as, we can make some more money. So White Rabbit herself is captured, but Janine has split herself off from White Rabbit. Janine goes to the Gotham City Sirens, Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, and Catwoman for help. Together they go to try to rescue White Rabbit and everyone else captured by this scheme. White Rabbit is able to kind of break out of the mind control when she sees that animals are being put in jeopardy by this plan as well. And we learn something new about her as a character, which hasn't really happened in a hot second because she's mostly been in the background of things. But she does have a strong affinity for animals. And in this situation where she is, once again, being mind-controlled, she is able to split herself off into a third version of her. So there's her civilian identity, White Rabbit, and now there is Dumb Bunny. Just this big, buff, dumb woman who no mind to be mind-controlled, just big and strong, smash White Rabbit out of trouble. So, like I said earlier, the evidence that she's able to split herself off into ways that help her in specific scenarios. White Rabbit being white when she is a child perhaps felt racially profiled and perhaps started to struggle with the fact that she was biracial and wishing that she could just present as white to avoid being racially profiled. And now, in a scenario where she's being mind-controlled, and in a dangerous scenario, splits into dumb, not able to be mind-controlled, big, buff rabbit lady to break her out of this scenario. And the most recent time that we have seen White Rabbit is in this year's mini comic series Two-Face, focusing, you guessed it, on Two-Face. We are going to have to delve into spoilers for that, and the run is really good, so if you don't want spoilers for this 5 or 6 issue run, I recommend skipping ahead a minute or two. So in this comic run, Two-Face is going to war with himself. The Harvey Dent side of him wants to do good again, even though he has gone down this criminal path. So he decides to form this courtroom for criminal trials when crimes are done within the criminal underworld against itself. Crimes go there and are presided against. That way there's not just crime wars going on in Gotham. He's able to prevent that from happening, or try to. And allow the business of crime to continue unimpeded in Gotham. But the bad half of him, Two-Face, is nah, we ain't letting that happen. So he forms his own little group of supervillains called the Shadow Hand, which is specifically targeting Harvey Dent's efforts. At night, when Harvey Dent thinks he's asleep, Two-Face is meeting with the Shadow Hand to figure out ways to cause war in the criminal underworld and undermine Harvey Dent's work. One plot in particular involves White Rabbit working with False Face being able to disguise himself as people, disguises himself as the King of Hearts from the Royal Flush Gang, and makes it look like that he is having an affair with White Rabbit while Jaina is in the background taking the photo. Ultimately, it's discovered that Jaina was the one taking the photo. Falseface's involvement is brought to the light, and so the war of the Royal Flush Gang is able to be prevented. And that is her plot, her part of Two-Face's plot, which she most likely was paid for. She escapes from this scenario, and that, to date, is the last we have seen her in the comics. Of course, more recently than that is us seeing her in the DCU in Peacemaker. So now that we know that she's in the DCU, how much of that seems connected to her in the comics? Well, her backstory and, superpowers, probably the same. But obviously we see her trying to join the Justice Gang here, which seems out of place for someone who is a criminal in the comics, until you remember that she's primarily in it for the money, and the Justice Gang is run by a billionaire. So this is probably her early in her career, trying to figure out what to do, most likely after she has left her father because of the abusive environment that she was raised in, being racially profiled, probably not supported by her father, hence why she feels the need to split herself into a white woman. But obviously when she's made fun of here for her looks, she runs out crying. Do I think we'll see a lot of her in the DCU? No, probably not. She's a pretty background character, but if we were to see her, I wouldn't mind seeing her in like a Batman video game as a side villain. That could be fun. Perhaps there's a little like DLC where we see before this event at Peacemaker, she's like, oh, I'll prove myself to Maxwell Lord. I'll, as my socialite, philanthropist, civilian identity, Jaina, I hear that someone's plotting against some Lord tech, whatever. As White Rabbit, I fight it off and like, yay, I did that. I proved myself to Maxwell Lord. I'll go apply to be on the Justice Gang. Just to be insulted for her costume in a very belittling and sexist manner would certainly put her down the path to, okay, well, being a hero didn't work out. They were kind of assholes. Time to become a villain. And you know what? That's going to be my headcanon unless we ever see her again. Again, don't particularly expect to, but this was a fun Easter egg. And the character splitting herself off into two also works thematically with what's going on in the Peacemaker Season 2, as he is seeing his other life in Earth 2, where seemingly as of episodes 1 and 2, everything going on for this other version of Peacemaker is better and everything that Peacemaker would want, which, again, Jaina having split into this white person to avoid racism, this is perhaps the version of her life that she wished she had. But, like, probably, hopefully, Peacemaker throughout this season will learn to accept his life and what has happened with it more. She will learn to accept herself better. And that could be the parallels going on there and why James Gunn chose to have this character be featured as an Easter egg in this episode in the DCU. Whew! Alright, I feel like I just blacked out and just nerded out for almost 20 minutes. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. That is the full and complete White Rabbit story in the comics. I would love to see more of her in comics, in live action, in video games. I think she's a fascinating character who has more room to be expanded on as a central character, and that seems to have been happening more and more recently with her more heavily featured in that Batman and Robin comic run, the Gotham City Sirens, and the Two-Face comic issues. Alright. that's truly all I have for right now. I need to drink some water and stop nerding out. But thank you so much for listening to me. Feel free to nerd out with me in the comments below, and have a good week.